Well, shortly after that bombshell, national chiefs canceled a chance to explain their position to the public as they prepared for the Friday summit. All this while a television crew was evicted from Attawapiskat and reporters remained largely banished from the public land in Ottawa, where Chief Spence is continuing her liquid diet protest and reportedly drawing up her will. On top of that, a new Angus Reid poll suggests the public is highly skeptical that Friday's meeting will accomplish anything. Here's the breakdown. If asked if it will be successful, 55% said nope, 27% said yep, and not sure, 18%. Well, let's bring in the MPs who have expertise on the issue to make sense of all this. Greg Rickford is the government's parliamentary secretary in Aboriginal Affairs. Carolyn Bennett is the Liberal critic on the file. Paul Dewar, the NDP MP for Ottawa Centre. Welcome to you all. Happy New Year and all that stuff. And Carolyn, you're right. This is January 9th, not the 8th, as I introduced off the top of the show. Year's already going fast. Okay. Let me ask you, in light of Chief Spence's erratic demands, it seems to me your demands are changing on the fly here. Is there a danger that this whole thing could become a bit of a farce? Paul, what do you think?
Well, you know, I think the main issues are clear, that the government has to follow up with what it said it was going to do last year. In fact, 4 years ago when the apology happened. And the meeting on Friday is going to be extremely important to do that. What you see from Chief Spence, what you see from Idle No More, is the fact that the words weren't followed up with actions by the government. So, you know, this isn't just about one person. Chief Spence has said that, to be fair to her, from the beginning. This is not just about her, it's about the reset of the relationship, and that's what's critical here.
Carolyn, you've been down to the island with the chief and seen her up close. Do you think that she's got to get some sort of firm agenda, a directed idea of what she wants out of this, rather than just continuing to make demands that the Ontario Premier come or the Governor General show up?
She's been very clear from the beginning that it needs to be a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Governor General, that because of the, I think, failure after the Crown First Nations gathering last year, where a number of things were promised, including resetting the relationship, that what we've seen is a whole bunch of legislation, including the omnibus bills, but without any consultation with First Nations, and to have their budgets cut, and that there's been a real disappointment. So I think Chief Spence has been very clear. She knows it won't be fixed with one meeting, but she wants to see a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Governor General to hear the issues that are important to First Nations, meaning economic development, resource sharing, and treaties. Really going back to what it said in the treaties about how we would share the land fairly together in this 250th anniversary of the Royal Proclamation, where we promised that.
Before I go to Greg, I want to clarify, what does she expect the Governor General to do? I mean, the Governor General basically responds to the Prime Minister, more or less. I mean, the Queen doesn't usually say to the Governor General, you override a policy decision by the government. What does she want the Governor General to do?
I think it's to remind people about what the treaties originally were signed with the Crown, even before Canada existed, even before Canada had a Prime Minister, that this was a deal about sharing the land and the resources and protecting the lakes and rivers. This was a real commitment. And so having the Governor General there is very important to the Chief. It's very important to First Nations, the relationship with the Crown, and so that the Prime Minister alone is not what she asked for at the beginning. She wanted a meeting so that you could. The Governor General was at the meeting last January 24th. That went nowhere. And so if we're going to
go any better this time around?
If we're going to reset the relationship, let's push reset and have the Governor General and the Prime Minister again to actually set out a course that'll really work.
Greg, are you worried that the government might be walking into some sort of no-win scenario here?
Well, first of all, we understood the importance of the Crown relationship, and certainly the importance of the symbolism of the Crown. That's why we had a Crown First Nations gathering, the first of its kind, and the Prime Minister and the Governor General, of course, the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, were there. This process has developed into substantive policy discussions. We're focusing in now on economic development, treaty rights. We want to clarify and discuss those. We look forward to the prospects perhaps of a working group. And this meeting, like the Crown First Nations gathering, is going to build on those conversations that came from that. So it's time to move on. These are policy discussions here, and the Prime Minister and the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs have accepted this invitation from the Assembly of First Nations, and we have every bit of confidence that they'll be the delegation there will represent the regional issues. Some First Nations communities may or may not be covered by treaties. They'll all bring in certain expertise on the three key areas we're going to talk about. So we'll build on that, and there's next steps.
Do you think that Chief Spence not being there is going to compromise this meeting?
Look, my concern with respect to Chief Spence is her health, obviously. We would like to build on some of the positive aspects of the relationship that we were working on this past year with the housing crisis. Obviously, we have worked with other communities, particularly in that region, on housing strategies. We've asked and we've provided support with them. We are making some inroads, and we'd like that relationship to get back and focus on those priorities.
Are you sensing this thing's going to go anywhere without Chief Spence at the table?
Well, you know, it's not just about Chief Spence. It's really about really building the trust again. You know, I just have a quote here from last year. The Prime Minister said, "Certainly in the past, lack of trust on both sides has held us back, but this is a new day." That was a year ago. The new day has not arrived. Right. So they have to rebuild the trust first. Then they have to get on with bringing in the people who are going to get the job done. Those are the leaders in the community. You know, I have to respectfully point out that it was because of Idle No More, the hunger strike itself, that people are seized with this issue. Make no mistake, the government would not have been having this meeting this Friday if there hadn't been people going to the streets literally to say it's not acceptable to have this kind of relationship continue.
Carolyn, do you think the Assembly of First Nations, which looks like it's going to take the lead on this meeting, can they represent Native peoples there? Because there seems to be a lot of people concerned that the grassroots and the leadership are in a disconnect. Is there a disconnect, and if so, how do you overcome it?
Well, I think that again, even if you go back to the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, there were questions there about how you could better organize and make sure that everybody felt listened to, and to put in place some real approaches to consultation so that there can be solutions bottom up, because it isn't homogenous across Canada, and that there are different needs across the country. I think that but those conversations need to begin. The conversations about how we would replace the Indian Act. And when you think of the Kelowna Accord, Don, and how we began with 400 people in a room, the cabinet ministers that were responsible. We then laid out 18 months on the things that really mattered to the leadership there. And out of that came hard targets, real money assigned, and a commitment to an annual meeting of all Aboriginal Affairs ministers, a biannual meeting of First Ministers, and we are just so far from that now. The Prime Minister needs to pick up the phone and get the Governor-General to the meeting on Friday.
60 days that Canadians rejected what the Liberals, including First Nations, that's why they're members of Parliament who represent, for the Conservative Party, huge swaths of provinces where there's a majority First Nation communities or critical mass of First Nations communities. What we found in 2006, particularly with respect to water and sewer, is the need for a coast-to-coast-to-coast consultation that we did in lockstep with the Assembly of First Nations. Some important things have come from that. Obviously, the capacity, the ability to report, monitor, and maintain state-of-the-art facilities, the need to replace them, critical infrastructure being replaced, and finally, standards that the federal government and First Nations can adhere to. National Education Panel, another great example where we walk lockstep with the Assembly of First Nations, performed a coast-to-coast-to-coast consultation, and by somebody who's worked in this area for most of their professional life, I can tell you First Nations will say they had not seen this scope or level of consultation.
I'm almost out of time. I want to quickly.
That's a fact.
Okay, I want to quickly go down the line in 10 seconds or less. Is this meeting going to be a bust, or is it going to produce anything resembling a solution? Carolyn Bennett?
If the Prime Minister can invite the Governor-General to come, if Chief Spence then will go, then we can begin the process that's been asked for.
Good.
It can be a new day, as the Prime Minister said a year ago, if he's going to follow up with action, real results, not more rhetoric, not more talk, but real results, and reformulate the relationship.
Do you believe
I
it's...
think it builds on shared priorities, Aboriginal economic development, treaties, and Aboriginal rights to the extent that they affect and impact each other. I think there's great hope for Friday. We've got a great agenda planned that we're looking forward to.
Want to share that agenda now, or you know? Oh, I know what most of it's about.
Okay.
All right, Greg Rickford, volunteer, Carolyn Bennett. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
When we return, Americans are losing their thirst for imported oil. That's a big problem for the Alberta oil patch. An analyst gives us her take, and the government makes an out of